Today we're going to go over a program that Josh from Sheffield sent, and we're going to go over what his goals are. Then we're going to have a look at the program and see if we can make some modifications, some changes. So I'm not here to say whether a program is good or bad. What I'm going to basically do is talk about the goals and look at the program and say, okay, do I like the program? What parts do I like about it? What parts might be a little bit better, right? So when we look at training, especially people that are training with purpose, you have to have specificity. So part of what we've asked here is what is your goal? Like you need a short-term goal, you need long-term goals. When you're writing programs, those goals the program needs to match up to the goals. So for example, if someone said that their only goal was to gain gobs of muscle, then a lot of flexibility, mobility work, a lot of endurance work, it doesn't line up with the goal. And it's not that it's bad to put that stuff in there, but we're going to have better results if we're very highly specific to the goals that you're looking for. So Josh's main goal is weight gain and specific to muscle. If we know that, then it's going to be more specific to high levels of tension. We need a good amount of volume. We need to probably have a bit of frequency over the week, and everybody's going to need something a little bit different. It depends on the training age. It depends on your muscle fiber makeup. It depends on how strong you are. So people who are in the early stages, so Josh is 23. He's been training for a few years. As Josh gets more and more muscle and more strength, things are going to change slightly. So depending on your training age, that's going to modify your parameters of what you're going to do. And then, like I said, your primary goal is also going to direct how you need to train. So since that's his only goal, I'm going to look at this in the context through the lens of just hypertrophy, just gaining muscular weight. Now, what we will tend to do at Muscle Nerds, we'll ask for three goals. We'll ask for a physique goal. So this is a good physique goal that Josh has, like muscle gain. We'll also ask for strength goal or goals. So are there certain specific lifts you want to bring up, like the bench, the squat, the deadlift, the clean, the snatch, whatever it may be. And then we'll ask for a conditioning goal. With a conditioning goal, we get people that come in from all different types of demographics for what we train at Muscle Nerds. So we may have people that have no conditioning goal at all because they might be someone like Josh here who just wants to gain muscle. So we might put in a minimal amount of some type of cardiovascular activity just to keep some health markers in check. If Josh was stage 2 hypertension, then I would probably tell him, hey, let's focus on bringing that down, trying to get it as close to at least pre-hypertense or not hypertense at all before we go on this journey. But we don't have that goal, we don't have information, so we can't actually talk about it. If your goal was, to come in and maybe you did want to run, say, a half marathon, we have to look at those goals and say, does this goal match up with the other ones, and which one's the most important right now? So we need to have a primary goal, a secondary goal, and a tertiary goal. And the amount of work that you put into each of those goals depends on where they are on the platform. So if somebody had muscle gain, that would be their primary goal. And they also wanted to gain some strength, but that was their secondary goal. Well, just putting on more muscle is going to make you stronger. However, if strength was the primary goal and hypertrophy was the secondary goal, its strength is going to be highly specific to lifting heavy shit. So if you just lifted for muscle gain, you would get a little bit stronger, but you wouldn't get as strong as you're going to get when you're banging out sets of 3 to 5. So that's how we start putting like the pieces of the puzzle together. Now, he only has one primary goal, so that's good. Let's see, he had the goal since he started lifting, want to achieve it within the next year or two. Now, a secondary thing to look at is how specific is your goal? Saying I want to gain weight or I want to gain muscle isn't highly specific. So when you go, I want to achieve it within the next year or two, what do you want to achieve? Do you want to put on 2 kilos of muscle, 20 kilos of muscle? Because that's going to change a lot of things as well, because we need to look at it from a standpoint of, is this actually achievable? Is it realistic? Is it psychologically achievable? Is it physiologically achievable? And we need to have stuff that we can measure. If you don't measure anything, you can't manage it, so you need data. So I would tell them as well that training goal for this program is be specific on how much you want to gain. That's also going to give you a diagnostic to understand if a certain method works well for you or it doesn't. So, for example, people's training ages are different, their bodies are different. When I was growing up and learning how to train, I competed in powerlifting for years, I competed in strongman, I competed in bodybuilding, and then I trained for American football. Now, that was over 35 years ago. And we look at, if I look at the data on how I train, anytime I do training that's like traditional like brotastic bodybuilding stuff, 8 to 12, 10 to 15 rep ranges, if I do that more than a few weeks, I actually get smaller. So for me, the vector isn't really the training volume as far as the rep ranges. It has to be with the intensity. I have to have high intensity lifting, grinding out heavy shit, or I get weaker and I get smaller. Now, someone who has just started training is in those first few years, their vector might actually be volume and they don't need a lot of intensity. But the more mature your muscle gets and the stronger you get, those vectors may change. So I would I would really highly advise Josh to make sure that he's tracking things like that and then associating what he did during a phase and how he responded to that, because he's going to save a lot of time in the future by not doing methods or not setting up the parameters in a way that's not conducive for his body. And again, being conscious that may change over time as well. Let's see. What are your medium and long-term goals? Medium term, 2 to 3 years, okay? And now we get some specificity. Comfortably sit at 90 kilos of body weight with fairly good condition. Again, fairly good condition is a bit ambiguous. That can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. Like most people, most men might think 20% is fairly good condition. I would say 15%, somewhere around that would be fairly good condition, and excellent condition would be getting like sub 12%. But we don't actually know because we don't have any specific numbers, and so you can't weigh or measure anything. He's currently at 75 kilos with slight definition. So long-term goal, 3+ years, maintain a body weight and leanness that is consistent, most likely once I reach 90 kilos, unless I decide this look isn't heavy enough. Now, if he wants to be 90 kilos and he wants to be like the leanness that is desirable for him, what we might have to do is go a little bit above 90 and then pull it back down. Or take since he has a long-term goal of 3+ years, we have the luxury, if he's already 75 with some slight definition, you could just take your time over that. 15 kilos in 3 years while maintaining a good level of leanness, that's super easy to do. So I do like that he has this long-term vision for what he wants to look at, because most people that train, they have the next 12 weeks in mind, not the next 12 months or the next 12 years. It's really important to think about that long-term goal, focus on that mainly, and then get stuck in the process, and then having these short and medium-term goals. Short-term might be every quarter, the medium might be every 12 months, and then breaking that down for your periodization so you can have benchmarks to say, hey, here's my report card. What happened in the last 3 weeks? Did it go well? Did it not go well? Now I can figure out why it did or didn't, and then you can make your adjustments. But a lot of people use a shotgun approach and they just start throwing shit at the wall to try to see what sticks, but then they don't pay attention to what is sticking on the wall. If we have some type of a low level of data, then it gives us a lot more information on how to progress ourselves over time. Training skills and capabilities. How long have you been training with a style of program? He's been training for just over 2 years with the style of program that he sent in. He's only recently upped it to 5 days per week. Summarize your training history. Purely weight training for hypertrophy. First 2 years, working out just to have fun, but with the intent to build muscle. That's totally fine. Having fun in your workouts is okay. It's not illegal. You're not going to get arrested for that, so don't worry about it. Sometimes if you get too crazy with what you're doing and too crazy with the data, then things becomes like a chore instead of a job. You start overthinking things. Year 3 became a PT, really focused on nailing form, learning how to gain weight. Years 4 to 6, putting to use my knowledge, complete 1 full massing phase and cutting phase, which has built majority of my current physique. Okay. Currently, he's in a dull spot due to commitments of moving house and a new job, looking to get back into it. Now, what I said earlier about tracking things, that's a good piece of information. So if I was Josh, I would be laying things out and putting dates on what was happening, because he might find this short-term goal of, say, 12 weeks why didn't I actually hit my goal? Was it because of what I was doing, or was it possible that this I just had a life thing that shot up? So might have been great programming, might have been great focus in the gym and nutrition. Just life shit happened, and that might have been the one thing that derailed that 12 weeks. So we need to know that, right? Because if he doesn't keep track of that, if he forgets when they were moving house, he might look back and they go, well, that method just didn't really work well for me. And he might throw away a perfectly good tool that might have been the best one for him. No injuries, slight lower back pain from being stupid my first few years, and deadlifting max weight at least twice per week. Yep, we've all done that, Josh. Take care of your back. You're 23. I can tell you at 46, things get harder and harder. So just make sure, especially with things like deadlifts, that you keep technique and form and bring that up slowly. Don't be in a rush. No health issues. Program is a muscle gaining purpose with a day to emphasize weak points. This can change for each phase. He's currently focusing on arms. How's it working? Quite well. I can guarantee 5 days per week, 90%, as long as no emergencies come up like the house commitment stuff. So having my main bulk being an upper-lower split helps maintain progress. The 5th day is a nice addition on a weekend when I'm not working to add in extra effort to weak areas. How well are you sticking to it? Currently not good because of the house commitment. I'm ready to get the ball rolling so I can start a cut for 3 months over March to May, ready for the holidays. Now, okay, Josh, your long-term goal is to put on weight, and you're already decently well-defined from what I see here. I don't have any pictures. I don't have any numbers, so I don't know. But if you have this long-term goal of putting on a lot of muscle and putting 15 kilos of size on, you have to get over this wanting to be cut for summer all the time, because then you start spinning your wheels. So a lot of people do these big cuts, and then they'll do a massive, like really fast cut trying to get ready for summertime, and they end up spinning their wheels. What I would tell you to do is, if you're dead set on doing this cut, do the cut, get to the level of leanness you want, something that you can actually maintain for a long time, and then start to slowly put on muscle mass. What people need to understand is that gaining muscle is a very slow process. That's why a lot of people, it's desirable for them to take performance-enhancing drugs, because it does speed the process up. So if you're not on PEDs, you need to take it nice and slow and steady, and have that long-term goal, and not really get too focused on like being shredded for summer, which in the UK is like 2 weeks in length. So it's not like you're able to show off your abs all the time. Do you have a nutrition plan? No, but I have a decent understanding of calories, macros, and how to create meals to best support my goals. Something I'm looking into is how to implement meal prep into my routine without it affecting when I eat with my partner, usually dinner or tea time. I think that's great. That's important to be able to, especially if you have a partner who wants to have that time to have a meal together every day. My wife and I eat vastly different things, so we don't eat together often because I eat at weird times and I eat lots of different stuff. So even though I don't do it, I'm a hypocrite. I commend you for that, thinking about your partner. But what I would tell you to do is having a decent understanding of calories and macros. That's good, but you also don't have any accountability or precision, and you have a highly specific goal of gaining weight. So what I would definitely recommend you do is, from time to time, don't do anything different with your food, but at least track it for a few days to make sure that you're covering your bases. Not saying you need to track every day, but it's good to do a touch-up of like 3 or 4 days every now and then, because over time you might find that your protein has gotten under where it needs to be, your fat might be a little bit too much, your carbs might not be high enough for bulking. So it's good to do that maybe like once a phase, like every now and then. Get an accountability of what you're doing, just like balancing your checkbook. And then if you find that it's kind of under and needs to be cleaned up, then you can now revamp your meal plan to make sure that you've covered that. And again, things will fall off over time, especially if you don't track. So take that report card often. I would say like at least once a month, if not, or once a quarter is probably totally fine. But I don't always track my food, but I can tell you just from experience, if I have a highly specific goal like that of like cutting or bulking, I will almost always track my food because it keeps me on track, right? So if I go into a bulk and I'm not tracking it, I start eating a lot of things that aren't really conducive to gaining the right type of bulk. As Obi-Wan Kenobi said in Star Wars, this is not the bulk you're looking for. So I think it's good to have that accountability and to kind of touch base with that and make sure that you're not slowly starting to morph into eating things that aren't going to be conducive to your goal, but might be conducive to your mental well-being. What are your thoughts on your training program? I think it covers the basics of frequency, intensity, volume. Volume is potentially low. I found it works well for me and has in the past. That's fine. Again, you understand what works well for you, so that's great. Exercise selection is based around my gym. Each exercise is chosen to ensure all ranges of motion of the muscle are hit. The split works around my life as well. Okay, so you found something that works for you. Fantastic. And Josh designed this one, and let's have a look at it. Okay, so Monday, lower A, seated leg curl. Great, that's fantastic. 2 sets there, leg press, 2 sets of 6 to 10. Good, so we have a bit of tension, like heavier loading on that. Walking lunges, 2 at AMRAP. One thing I would say, just purely based on your goal of hypertrophy, hypertrophy needs tension. And so you have this inverse relationship between tension and velocity. So what I would tell you is a walking lunge, while it's great, is probably not the best exercise for what you're trying to do here. I think that if you want some type of lunge type pattern, some form of split squat would be a really good choice. Even like a front foot elevated split squat, because then you can load it more and you don't have to worry about range of motion. Nothing in your goals has said anything about range of motion, mobility, flexibility being a factor. So I personally would switch the walking lunge out and put in something that's not as dynamic. Now, if you're using walking lunges because you want to maintain some type of like dynamic resistance and you want that, that's fine, but it is pulling out slightly from your main goal, which is to put muscle size on. So either maybe switch that out for a split squat, and a split squat that is highly loadable, which would be a front foot elevated split squat would be my choice, or just use a different big boy exercise. Like what I've noticed when I looked through this earlier is there's a lot of exercise selection, but you only have 2 sets of everything. What I would probably tell you to do is, instead of doing 2 sets of leg press and then going to walking lunge, just do 4 sets of leg press, right? Now, if you're wanting something that wasn't, more of that squat pattern that's really focusing on mainly quads, if you're using walking lunges to kind of cover that gap of only having 2 sets of hamstrings and 2 sets of quads, then yeah, split squat would probably be your better choice. Then standing calf raise, that's good. Upper A, which is on Tuesday, we have a kettlebell lateral raise. All right. This is one of those exercises that looks cool on paper, but I don't think it's going to be a great exercise for you. Again, most kettlebell handles, unless you have specialized handles, they're going to be the rounded kettlebell handle. It's going to be hard to grip. So you're going to be fighting this grip, which is going to take a lot of the emphasis away from what you're trying to do, which is trying to hit your delts. You might think about switching that out for a dumbbell lateral raise, or if you wanted a better choice, would be a cable lateral raise, because then you can keep more tension on the muscles. So just remember, building muscle volume, especially time under tension, and having tension is going to be more important. It's probably going to be the most important thing you could possibly do. So using a cable would allow you to keep more tension on the muscle for a longer period of time. That would increase your volume of time under tension, and I think you would probably get a lot better results that way. And it's a lot easier as well with cables to manipulate your body to try to hit the muscle where you really want to feel it and really isolate it. Because if we're doing lateral raises, we're thinking, at least for bodybuilding, if we do lateral raises for things like weightlifting or or rehab, prehab, we might be having a different conversation. But for hypertrophy, I think taking that and providing a platform for being able to hold tension for a longer range of motion, and being able to have more consistent without worrying about your hands holding on to a dumbbell handle that's not really made for that. I think that's a better choice. I would also tell you that lateral raise is probably going to be better later in the workout, because your next exercise is a cable incline press, which is great. So I know you have cables. If you didn't have cables, That kettlebell lateral raise, I would say to move it to a dumbbell. And then even do things like alternating your position of like lean away or even side lying on an incline bench would be able to somewhat mimic the increased tension and an increased range of motion as a cable. But if you have cables, I would just use those. Then you have pull-ups, nothing wrong with that. Cable supported row, nothing wrong with that. So we have some chest, we have some lat, we have some back, or could be lat depending on how you're doing the supported rows. And then cable D-bar push down. I don't know what a D-bar is. I'm thinking a D-handle, but in any event, that's fine. You got an isolation movement for your triceps. That's at the end of the workout, which is good, so it's not going to affect your incline press. But I would take the kettlebell lateral raise and put it between the supported row and the push down, because you're going to get plenty of shoulder work with the incline press, with the pull-ups, and with the cable supported row. If you do that lateral raise first, there's a potential that it's going to pull away from some of the effort you could be doing with the big movement. So we want to think about like what is the main emphasis, what's the big stuff, what is the meat and potatoes. The big stuff like your incline press, your pull-up, and your row, that's going to be your meat and potatoes. So you want to put that when you're fresh, especially if you're doing things where it's going to be heavier and it's detrimental to have things pre-fatigued. And then, yeah, the lateral raise, nothing that you're doing here is going to massively affect an isolation movement like that. So putting that down between row and push down, I think, is probably going to be the best way of doing that. Now, when we go to the next exercise, which is lower, on Thursday, you have a 45-degree glute ham raise. I've never seen a 45-degree glute ham raise. I'm assuming you're meaning like a Roman chair, like the 45-degree back extension. Okay, nothing wrong with that. But again, I would tell you that that's probably going to be best off later in the workout. Leg extension, the 45 glute ham raise is not going to affect the leg extension. It might possibly affect some of the hack squat. I don't think that like it's that imperative on this one that we move that, but I would do the big stuff first. With a leg extension, that's perfect. You have an isolated knee position. You've got a hack squat, a big squat movement pattern where you can load it. Now, a couple of different things you could think about doing here. If you wanted to focus on a lot more tension, I would put that hack squat first, followed by the leg extension, but you could pre-fatigue it if you wanted to and do the leg extension and hack squat. I would probably say that because you have a really low amount of set volume and a really low amount of rep volume, I personally would move the hack squat first. Then I would follow it probably by the glute ham raise, let my quads recover, and then hit the leg extensions third, and then the calf raise last. And I would also say that, again, considering your hypertrophy as your main objective, no reason to really do a seated calf raise when you could just do another standing calf raise. You've already got standing calf raise in your first workout, so we know that's a possibility. You could just do standing calf raise again on Thursday. There's really no reason to have two different calf raises, especially with such a short range of motion and such a low amount of volume. And the seated calf raise, you're going to use way less weight. You're going to be concentrated more on the ankle than you are going to be on the meaty part of the calf, like is the gastroc. So I think that you're probably going to be best served by changing that to something where you have a semi-bent knee instead of a fully bent knee, or a straight leg. So another round of standing calf raise, or you might look at doing it like a donkey calf raise or a leg press calf raise, something like that's probably going to be a better use of your time. When you have a low volume like this, you need to, massively imperative to have exercises that are more productive, that you can use more weight, you can use more range of motion on. So again, I think the seated calf raise isn't necessary there unless you've got ankle flexibility issues, but we don't have that information. Friday, your next upper body day, cable reverse fly. I like that you're using cables on that. Bent over row, pull over, dumbbell fly press, barbell curl. So again, we're just going to have that same conversation that cable reverse fly is probably going to be better off later in the workout. Bent over row, I love bent over rows. If they work well for you, great. Now, you have a fairly low volume program, so it's probably not that big of a deal, but if you were like really smashing that lower B workout, you may, if you have DOMs and fatigue, have an issue with that bent over row where you're fighting that position more than with so much emphasis that it's going to be really hard to concentrate on your rows. So I don't necessarily think you should remove that. But you might also, if when you're looking at the next program, if you're going to keep that same bent over rowing pattern, maybe start considering like a T-bar row or a chest supported row, chest supported machine row, cable row, something like that, where you don't have to worry too much about holding position and you can focus on just lifting the weight and improving the connection and how much tension that you can provide. Pull over, love it. Lengthen range of motion for the lats. Not a problem there. I think it's a good position in the workout. Dumbbell fly presses, I'm trying to figure out what that is because, again, like there's no real industry standards, so people just call stuff whatever they want. So sometimes I'm old school, so I know exercises, from 40 years ago or how I was taught them before the internet came and started naming them all different stuff. So I don't know what that is. Like when I would look at something like that, I would like a dumbbell press to eccentric fly, or maybe it's just a wider dumbbell press where you have less or a little bit more elbow bend. We're going to call it that. Maybe instead of doing a press, instead of doing a fly, maybe it's just more of like a W type of fly where you've got your elbows bent a little more. I like that. I think it's in a good position. Barbell curl. I think there are better options on that one. So if you were going to do the barbell curl, a Scott curl, or what the cool kids would call a preacher curl nowadays, something like that might be a better idea, or even a cable curl, something like that, where again, you can provide more tension for a longer period of time in a program where you have very low volume. So I think that's good for those. And then the last day for the arms, you start this out with more of a shoulder movement, a barbell upright row. I like to put in the rear delt row. I like to put shoulders with arms as well. But what I would tell you is that barbell upright row, I would probably use cable for that. I would also, or just do more lateral raises because you already have that in the workout. And I'd probably move that again later in the workout. The rear delt row still, I would move that later in the workout. And then since this is an arm-based workout, really concentrate on those instead. The dumbbell rear delt row, nothing wrong with that. But again, start considering that maybe a cable's a bit better. So something like a really wide grip cable row with your shoulders really abducted would be a good choice. If you did that dumbbell rear delt row, it doesn't say, but like on an incline might be a good idea. Bent over, not, but all I can see is the exercise here. But again, I think there's probably better exercises you could be using. But move those later in the workout. So maybe put them even at the end of the workout because they're not going to affect anything. Nothing you're doing with your arms are necessarily going to affect that. But maybe some of the bicep stuff. But it's a secondary exercise because it's an arm day. So we might want to rearrange that a bit. Smith banded JM press. That is an abomination of an exercise. And realistically, JM press is going to be more specific to powerlifting. Now, I don't hate it. I don't know, like Smith banded. I've never tried them. I'd have to. I like that you're using bands is good because it's going to overload elbow extension. But there are probably easier, less convoluted movements that you could be doing, just like standard triceps pressing. Or if you wanted something that's a big movement like that, since a JM press is kind of like an extension press, even like a close grip bench might be a better big movement for that, especially if you're using like a close grip on a football bar or a Swiss bar. But yeah, I don't not like it. So, but I just have to try it out because after 40 years of training, I've never actually done that movement. I would almost always use a JM press for somebody who wanted to build up a bigger bench press. Cable preacher curl, beautiful. I like that. Dumbbell overhead triceps extension. Now, again, we don't have any information, so I don't know how you're doing this. Are you doing it with one big dumbbell behind your head, which is the dumbest way of doing it? It makes me cringe when people are doing that. Are you doing a dumbbell in each hand? Probably a little bit better. Optimally, single arm is probably going to be the best. And again, I can't reinforce this enough. You have limited training time. That dumbbell overhead triceps extension is cutting out a good amount of tension. You're really only going to have good amount of tension, and it's subpar tension in the lengthened range to the mid-range, and then it's going to drop off quite a bit. So I would tell you that if you didn't have access to cables and you wanted to do that, I would tell you to do a side lying on a bench, because at least then it improves the loading pattern. But since you do have cables, why aren't you just using more cables, man? Like dumbbell presses, dumbbell rows, things like that are going to be perfectly fine. But when you start getting into things like extensions and curls, dumbbell movements on those are going to be fine, but it would be really important to figure out where your body position was going to be in order to maximize how much time under tension you could get with that. So I would 100% tell you, just do a single arm overhead triceps extension, or even like maybe even like a French press, something like that, probably be a better use of your time. Dumbbell incline curl, no problem there. I like that depending on how much incline you have. So with a dumbbell incline curl, for me, the more incline, the better. I see what you're doing. You're trying to get the biceps into like a more lengthened range. Nothing wrong with that. But the last thing I'll say, so again, I like how you're setting this up. I like the split. I just think that moving some things around and then some good substitutions are probably going to be a better idea. I would tell you, because it's low volume, I'm hoping you're getting at least some feeder sets for like warm-ups type things, because you could have these two. Most of your stuff is done very close to failure, which is important. But if you did want to beef up a little bit more volume, you could add in 2 or 3 feeder sets as a warm-up. With the barbell upright row, if we do switch that, I would tell you to either use an easy bar, or if you're using a cable, use the easy bar attachment. And the reason is, a lot of people don't have the mobility to do an upright row with a barbell. So it's a lot easier to use something that puts you in a better position to pull without pulling into a lot of internal rotation at a position in the joint that's going to be detrimental to that. So what you'll end up doing is you'll do that barbell upright row and just have to go at a short range. Or if you go larger range, you're going to start impinging the shoulder. Using something like an easy bar where you're in this position, you can pull out and up, is going to be a better idea. But I also will say, I think that there are better shoulder exercises than that one for what you want to do. And I think that you're using a lot of exercise variation that you don't need to be doing. If you had more volume than this, then what I would tell you to do is, yeah, use a lot of exercise variation, but sometimes we're doing too many different movements. So I would be taking some of these out and saying, okay, how many rear delt movements do I have? I think you have 3 for a total of 6 sets. Just break that into 2 with 3 sets. And just really focus on 1 or 2 exercises per body part, and then use those other variations in the next phase so you can keep things fresh. But there can be an issue of having too much variation. I think that most of what you should be doing for hypertrophy is probably, you looked at, said, I want using exercises that are giving me exposure to a lot of different positions. So if we look at positions of flexion, like mid-range, lengthened range, shortened range, probably the 2 most important ones for hypertrophy is going to be mid-range and lengthened range. So what I would recommend is anything you're going to do that's a high intensity movement, like these 6 to 10, and they're more like power movements. You're just trying to move some heavy weight, like bench press, pull up, row. Those are good mid-range movements for that. And then with all of your isolation work, consider doing most of that in the lengthened range or mid to lengthened range. And I think that would be, I think you would get much better results with that. And yeah, so that is, oh, last thing. Also consider too, when I wrote this down earlier, I was counting out how many exposures you had to each movement or each body part. And then I separate that out in like back, lat, quad, calf, all that. And then what I did is I took some of them that had overlap, like your back and your lats, and I put those into one. You seem to be doing a lot more. This is supposed to be like an arm specialty phase, but you don't seem to be doing a lot of arm movements when you compare them to the other body parts. So that may be something to think about. And I realize you're going to have some overlap with some of the big movements, but you might find after you get through a phase or two of this is go into a really big arm session and crank your arm volume up really high for one phase, and then bring it back down and see what happens. So you basically create an overreaching and super compensation type of effect with your arms, and then drop the arms for a phase and see what happens. And a lot of times people's arms will grow a lot faster doing it that way. And that is it. Nice job, Josh. Just a couple of changes. If you do decide to make those changes, let us know, and then let us know if it worked for you and what the results were.